Hi, Rebecca.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
I am not muted.
Oh, I think we've got you now. But can you try again? It was kind of quiet, so I don't know. I can't
Sure.
tell how loud you are.
I'm not muted. Can you hear me now?
I think that's okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca, radio check. Do you have us?
I'm reading you loud and clear. How about you guys? Can you hear me?
Relatively. I think once the room quiets down, we'll be able to. So
Great.
looks
Thanks.
like a great pub that you're in right now.
I know, if only it was. It's the spare room at my brother's house, and that's just a bed. But I have visited a few pubs in the last few weeks.
House. It looks like a mansion, a royal mansion, even.
Yeah, like I said, it's my brother's house. I'll tell him you said it looks like a mansion.
Rebecca, can we try that one again? We got the volume turned up just a little bit.
Sure. How's that?
Perfect. That's much better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And we'll get going in about a minute here. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Please join me for a flag salute. We don't have a flag. Let's pretend like it's in the corner where it always lives. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Present.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Ms. Duncan,
Here.
Ms. Hemschut,
Here.
and Mr. Miller.
Here.
Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? No ceremonial matters, which would bring us to special reports. Is there anyone for government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? Students and guests. All right, that would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual. Would anyone like to address the assembly this evening?
Mark Sicko.
Ready, set, go.
Okay.
State your
name-
name for the record, please.
My name is Lance, yours, and I'd like to bring to the attention of the city council that currently, because of our city charter, I believe it's called, that anybody who works for the city of Sitka is not allowed to run to be elected on the school board. And I was hoping that maybe somebody will take that cause up and address that. It would have to go to the vote of the people through the city councilman, is that how I'm told it has to go. So the city of Sitka is, I believe, the second largest employer of the people who live in our town. So it's just a large portion of the population that's not allowed to run for the school board. And I know I would run for the school board if I was allowed to. And I think that there's other people who work for the city of Sitka who may want to be interested in running at some point in their life to be on the school board, but they can't currently. So I think it'd be a quick vote for the people. I've talked to some people who are employed by the school district and they don't really consider themselves city employees. I can't speak for them, but that's what I was told, by a teacher who told me that, they work as a teacher, but they don't really consider themselves as a city employee. So I was hoping that maybe somebody here, I think it takes two people actually, could, do some looking into that and then bring it to the vote of the people so that it would be okay for people who work for the city of Sitka to be on the school board. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rich McClear. I like cruising. I like talking to visitors who come off the ships. I like the business it brings to Sitka. I like the pedestrian-only Lincoln Street. It allows friends to earn pocket money while busking, and it allows startup entrepreneurs a venue for their new businesses. It adds a festival atmosphere to downtown. The temporary tourism plan did a good job of mitigating problems on short notice. But now that we've almost through a full season, Sitka needs to look at broader issues of big ship tourism. I want to start a discussion on cruise ships before the municipal elections, and I offer a few suggestions. What is Sitka's carrying capacity? Is there a tipping point where too many visitors in a day hurts business? Can a big crowd hamper sales? Are businesses that rely on local sales hurt by a lot of tourists being in town? Is there a point where crowds lead to bad reviews on Cruise Critic and TripAdvisor, harming Sitka's already good reputation? Once we determine the carrying capacity, can we limit the number of cruise ship visits? Bar Harbor, Maine put a proposition on the November ballot to limit cruise ship visitors to 1,000 a day. They already have a limit of between 3,500 and 5,500, depending on the season and the day. And Portland, Maine is also considering a similar ordinance. We've been told we can't limit cruise passengers over a private dock, But that is exactly what Bar Harbor and Portland are trying to do, and what Bar Harbor does already. Sitka should monitor the legal implications of their action and maybe take it as an example. Another question, can we improve our infrastructure to handle the influx at a reasonable cost? Today, I could not make a cell phone call to a medical provider in Anchorage because of traffic on the cell network. The same bottlenecks have at times hampered my ability to do business on big cruise ship days. Right now, our telecommunications infrastructure cannot handle the increased traffic of tourism. How does this affect the rest of the economy of Sitka? And finally, is there a point where downtown real estate becomes too valuable for businesses that cater to local residents? We've seen storefronts in Juneau, Ketchikan, and Skagway brought up by outside businesses like Little Switzerland and Diamonds International. Sections of Juneau's downtown have become winter season ghost town. Can we learn from this? There are, of course, other questions. The candidates are in this room or here virtually if they're running for legislature. I hope to hear a serious discussion during the campaign on the future of big ship cruise tourism in Sitka. And I hope that you reinforce your opinions with research, facts, and statistics. I look forward to the campaign.
Ryan Herbert. Just agree with him. The water main that's not being replaced, that's 57 years old underneath Sawmill Creek, I think should come. 2.4 we're spending on a seawalk, and I think that is in parameters of what the cruise ship should pay for it, because they use our water for the bathrooms, they use our water to drink, they use our water for the ships, they use water for everything just like we do. That's not infrastructure, that's a basic necessity for all of us. And I just think that should be something we tackle right now while it's being done. So a 20-year road doesn't get put on something that's going to break in 5. I've already seen the chunks coming off it because I do work on the road. Project patience, I think should be established. I think we should, thank you. But I think we should have project patience on the workflow. I mean, it rents for $50 for 8 hours. It makes no money. It makes no sense to work on it right now unless we're going to increase the value of it. It should be $500 to $1,000 to rent it for 8 hours because it needs to make money to repair itself. We shouldn't be spending money to repair it. Tourist overpopulation, I think we should figure out a balance. Maybe the occupancy of the stores and the businesses should all be added together, and then that should be put back to 50% or 60%, and only 50% should be filled by tourists off the boat because they honestly don't spend any money here. It's $12 they spend at a store. They tip horribly. They write, like you said, bad reviews. We have visitors that filled our town that spend $20,000, $50,000. And I'd rather save the space in the restaurants and the places for them to spend money. But right now, from the many I've talked to, they won't go downtown because of the tourists. So you're holding all the money away from downtown with allowing the cheap people to come here. Tariff on the infrastructure. I mean, if we can't get them to pay for infrastructure with the money they give us, then maybe when they get off the boat, each person pays $50 to get off the boat. That way, every person who steps off the boat puts money into this town. And then we take that money to put into infrastructure that they pay for. And $50 a person to get off a ship and come here is really not that much. Give them discounts for elderly, give them discounts for kids. Kids might be free, infants, stuff like that. But adults can afford $50 to visit our town. In fact, they should be. New tower for sale, like you said. Tuffy's already agreed to have one on his building, which is right in downtown. We should put up a new cell tower paid by the tour companies and stuff to put on for them. They should pay for it because they're the only ones that use it and stay off of our network. Stay off our cell towers, stay off of our internet, and just build their own. And wherever they want to put it would be great. They can build multiples and build them out the road. And then maybe we can piggyback off of them for the winter time and use it. And I think that would be a great option. Other than that, thank you guys for your time. And I appreciate all of you.
Good evening, Sitka. My name is Richard Ween. We live on an island that is completely dependent on fossil fuels for all our goods and services. And that's why economics is such an important issue, not only globally, nationally, state-wise, but also locally. And that's why this has to be part of the conversation. I thoroughly and completely and 100% agree with Rich McClear. We had spoken about this in the past, about considering getting the sweet spot to tourism here. And we needed to start smaller, but we've allowed I'll say outside forces and individuals to determine the future of Sitka. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be performed. One interesting thing is that we speak about supplemental appropriations, but speaking of tourism, but while walking in here tonight, I think we need to make an appropriation for supplemental oxygen. There were 7 buses which were lined up there, and 5 of them were running. So, I think this is what, at 6 o'clock? I think things need to be rethought. Good intentions pave the road to hell. A couple of things about economics. I'm sure you know about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which recently came out with their productivity numbers. The second quarter, productivity in the United States was down 4.6%. Of interest, the first quarter, it was down 7.4%. And what happens is that the total unit labor cost is up 10.8%. And these things are just numbers, but in essence, it equals inflation, it hits the supply side, et cetera. And there's something that's very important that happens in Alaska, which makes it so special. And that if you look at the Alaska Economic Trends, the August 2022 issue, you'll see a certain thing about, there are a number of important things that they say, but one thing is migration. And that Alaska is a very fluid state, people coming in and out. But the thing is that certainly in Southeast, with Southeast by the numbers, people are leaving. And people are in general leaving Alaska. Where that's important is that they broke this down by age. And so people who are young who come here generally don't stay very long. And what happens is, I see, for example, in Sitka, people come up here, get involved, wear extra tufts, vote, they mix up politics and then leave. It's nice to develop a place where people are committed and will live here. Thank you.
Anyone else to address the assembly this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to consent agenda.
I move to appoint Peter Jerczak.
Consent agenda, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, the minutes from, I forget which night. July 12th.
26th.
And 26th.
Second.
And 26th.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the July 12th and 26th assembly meeting minutes. Is there any public comment? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the July 12th and July 26th assembly meeting minutes, Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Timshut,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosier.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item A.
Board, commission, and committee appointments. Kevin, the one you've been waiting for all night.
I move to appoint Peter Jerczak to a 3-year term on the Building Department Appeals Board and reappoint Tyler Green to a 3-year term on the Ports and Harbors Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint and reappoint. Is there any public comment on the appointment and reappointment?
Good evening, Richard Ween speaking. As far as item B goes, Peter Jerczak is running for the Building Department Appeals Board, and that is one of the probably less glamorous kind of boards. But Peter Jerzak is a wonderful individual. He has an enormous amount of experience. And again, all these individuals who join need to be thanked for stepping up, especially those individuals who are committed to Sitka and who have a knowledge base. The other individual, Tyler Green, is for a re-up on Ports and Harbor. And again, people who want more punishment, I think all the best to them. I have seen him work at Ports and Harbor. He's good. And he is a fisherman, commercial, 20 years. And I think, again, thank you very much for continuing to do it. It's sometimes thankless, but here's your thank you. Thank you both to Peter and Tyler.
Is there any other public comment on the appointment and reappointment? Assembly discussion? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to appoint Pete Jerzak to a 3-year term on the Building Department Appeals Board and reappoint Tyler Green to a 3-year term on the Port and Harbors Commission, Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot,
Yes.
and Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item B.
Bring us to unfinished business, item C, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-17 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriation for fiscal year 2023 critical repair for scrapyard bailiff.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-17. Is there any public comment?
Richard Ween. I know sometimes second readings appear to get lost under the radar, but I think different people come here and different people probably listen to various meetings, and it's important to explain what's being voted for. It's a scrapyard baler, which was said, that was in the motion, but this is the baler that crushes down cars and so forth. It has an opportunity to make money for the city. On some good years, it's over $300,000. And what's happening to it, it's been in action for, I think, like 20 years. And evaluation states that it needs a new cylinder for its hydraulics, and that'll cost about $60,000. That's a short-term solution, but seemingly a good one to get things going. So the supplemental appropriation is a great idea, but of even more interest is that they have a sinking fund for the for this particular machine, and that the sinking fund has about $862,000 in it, which is about the approximate cost for a new baler. At the last meeting, I recommended, since it takes about 1 year, once you put the order in, it's almost as fast as Amazon. I ordered something today and it was 3 weeks it's going to get here. Anyway, I think it would be a great idea if they took that money and replaced it, because it's something that's used all the time and beneficial. And then from what we heard from Administrator Leach is that there may be resale value of the current machine once we get it up and going. So yes to the appropriations and yes to get the new one. And again, watch Goldfinger if you want to see one of these things in action. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on ordinance 22-17?
Ryan Herbert. Just to talk about the bailiff for a minute. Is there an option of something we can just utilize for now, just to do that so we don't have to spend the money so radically when there's anything? Because I know we can crush that with bulldozers and backhoes and excavators, and we can rent those when we need them to crush what needs to be crushed, rather than getting something that's critical so fast when there's money that can be appropriated to other things for now. Because we do have huge excavators that can be rented for minimal costs on the weekends to crush everything, and then utilize that money for something we need and not do that now. And you might want to just use those from now on because rental equipment is maintained by the company that you rent it from. Whereas we wouldn't have the cost and overhead of taking care of equipment ourselves. And you would cut out all the maintenance fees on that entire site if you just rent equipment once every 2 weeks or once a month to crush everything and then take it back. And people would get a chance to get operator hours that are important for building things here. People would get the chance to start building up their experience and hours on all kinds of equipment. And then we wouldn't have to maintain it anymore.
Anyone else on 22-17? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-17 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. Knox.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on second and final reading.
Item D, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-18 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023 for an ADA second bus shelter.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-18. Is there any public comment?
Good evening. This is Richard Ween. This is an appropriation, which is something that's good, meaning it is for the ride, which is a service through granting that is offered by the Zika tribe of Alaska. In the past, the Assembly has given up to $25,000 in monies. We'll call it as goodwill money, and that's a wonderful thing. This particular item requests a supplemental appropriation of $29,000 to build this ADA bus shelter. And it's, if for no other reason that it's needed, it is a wonderful thank you for the service that the ride provides to Sitka. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on 22-18? Assembly deliberation? John?
Thanks, Mayor. One of the comments from the last session on this item was about local contractors, and spoke with staff after the first reading. And we will explore and see if that capability to build this shelter locally is an option to consider.
Great, thank you. That was a concern I had brought up, and I also want to thank you for you and your staff's continued work to partner with the ride. I've definitely seen efforts being made in accommodating and moving them into better, safer areas so that the whole community benefits from the ride. I appreciate your continued work on it, and I appreciate the partnership of the Assembly with the ride, not only monetarily, but with land and in this instance, some infrastructure. Sarah, on the 22-18.
On the motion to approve ordinance 2022-18 on second and final reading, Ms. Himshoot,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Eisenbeiß.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item D.
Bring us to new business, item E, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-19 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023, Latchley Middle School heat pumps.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-19. John, do you have a brief introduction on this item before we go to public comment?
I do. Thanks, Mayor. And before I get into that, I want to let you know that Ron Vincent's here. Melissa's here to speak to some financial aspects if we need any questions answered. Superintendent Hauser is here from the school district, and I think Mr. Bartolava's back there from the school district as well, because I know a lot of these questions may pop up through the discussion. But what I'd like to just talk about here quickly is that it was early in July of this year, just actually a few weeks ago, that the school district communicated to the city that they had a massive failure of their heat pump systems, and there is essentially no heat in the buildings for the kids before the kids go to school this coming winter in Blatchley. You know, I know there might be a lot of questions here on 100% exactly where all of the spending is going, but I would consider this kind of an emergency appropriation. So we are making our best estimates, we're doing our best analysis, and there's a lot of contingencies built in because we only know so much right now. I see in the memo that I talk about any unspent funds will go back into the general fund. But the fact that we have to move fast, we don't have a lot of time to get really in-depth condition assessments. I think we have some good assessments right now, but I just want to put that out front before those questions pop up. When this came to us, I talked to city staff and explained that the mission in front of us is just get heat in the buildings before wintertime. So that's what we're operating under right now. But that's all really I have to introduce it. And as I said, there's some staff here that can answer questions if you have anything further.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment on ordinance 22-19?
Good evening. This is Richard Ween speaking. Clearly, you need heat, and it's something through the use of heat pumps, that's something that's very good. It's sorry that they had to have a failure. Just some information is that there are apparently 5 units within Blatchley, and the replacement costs for all of them are about $389,000. But there are some issues where it was necessary to put in a very large contingency because it's not clear exactly what the story is. So the contingency is 40%. And the asking appropriation is $600,000. One of the important things, or one question I have, is it seems it's a foregone conclusion that it's Mitsubishi, which I was curious as to why. And the question that follows that is, what was the cost of the maintenance of that system over the 10 years that it was in existence? Because apparently it was placed in 2011. So is this the best system to replace it with? Within the memo, there was no notion that it would be any other type of device. And I'd appreciate any wisdom on that. Of note, within the memo, it said that they now, meaning the city, now anticipates a $2.5 million rather than a $3.7 million surplus. And part of it will have to wait till final numbers come in. So again, economics drives this. But there was an interesting sentence, and I'm going to hold people to this because I will remember, and that this sentence said within the memo, the unexpected nature of this asset failure highlights the need to complete condition assessments of school buildings to ensure both the assets are meeting their expected life and that such replacements are planned. I think that's wonderful, and that should have been ongoing from day one. We know about the replacement of the schools that's needed. We know this is just going to cost. If we take this into consideration, it's good to know the cost because it all boils down to economics. So to me, that was the key statement in the memo. I'd like to know what the maintenance record is on these 5, which all of a sudden caused a catastrophic failure. And clearly you need heat, but it's something that needs a little more conversation. And this is only the first reading. Thank you.
Ryan, make sure you speak right into the, closer to the mic.
Yeah. I'm Ryan Herbert. Like, I'll piggyback off what he was trying to say, what he was saying, which I think is correct. Looking up a new system to replace the old system would probably be better, because just like tools and everything else, it's the designers that make the things, not the product that we get. So getting the best equipment isn't necessarily the same company. Over time, companies change engineers, they change designers, they change everything around it. So finding the best company based on the designers is what I think we should do with that. And when we replace those 4, and maybe even replace the 5th that just needs repairs, we should we should find better system. I would even implore actually looking up new systems altogether, not even go back to pumps, and figure out something per room that's like an overhead like they're doing now, which conserves energy. Maybe going into something that uses a little bit more electricity, less other things, oil stuff, because we owe huge amounts of electricity bills because of our dam, and monetizing that into the cost would be paramount to help pay for it. And if we can itemize each room having their own system, just like houses have now, it'll be a lot more efficient. Those units are so much cheaper to replace. They operate so much better. The amount of money and cost it costs to repair should be looked up before we buy the equipment, to figure out how much it's going to cost to repair the new units we're going to get. Aftermarket parts are always better than preliminary parts, because design implications are never finalized. Everything is put out on the market these days in our consumer-driven world, to where aftermarket parts are necessary. And aftermarket just means that a designer that loves that item has redesigned that part to work more efficiently and longer of a time. It's the same with my truck. I don't replace the ball joints with standard ball joints. I replace them with commercial grade ball joints, because I know I'll never wear them out. So now I have a lifetime warranty on my ball joints. Same thing why I buy Bilstein shocks, because they're lifetime replacement, unlike the Napa shocks, but they cost 3 times as much. The same thing and the same effort should be put into what we're doing with these. I think we should look up the best products based on companies that already run them all over in conditions and temperatures and weather like we have, as well as looking up the aftermarket parts. I mean, you can find a blog on these things and find everybody that's either raving about them or has problems with them or something. But I do feel like a lot of research should go into it before we actually just buy something and replace it with something that's already broken in less than 12 years. Like, can we find something that has a warranty for 20 years? Or a lifetime warranty would be even better. And if it costs us twice as much for a lifetime warranty, at least we know we'd never have to pay again to replace it. That's the same reason why I didn't put a little pump in my downstairs apartment. I paid $3,000 for a sump pump that goes in the ground. So the lifetime warranty on that makes sure I never have to mess with my septic again.
Any other comments on 22-19? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Kevin?
I'd love to hear from district staff about not necessarily about the actual failure, but just about the equipment. It doesn't seem like it's been in there for a real long time, like 11 years for commercial grade, large industrial type heat pumps doesn't seem like a real good lifespan. So if there's any ideas around that, what the process will be going forward, and then how do we deal with this better in the future? And there's been quite a few different conversations about how with our district buildings, we don't have money saved to be able to deal with situations like this. And it's something that I think in the future we need to deal with in a different format, or we got to start a different conversation about it. But just based on what we're seeing with this one, what can we do? What's the process going forward here?
Frank Hauser, Superintendent. I'm actually going to let Mike Bartolava kind of speak to that, but if there's other questions, maybe I'll add a little too.
Mike Bartolava, Maintenance Director, 6th School District. So talking with the contractor that we had, our second contractor to look at these units, his kind of prognosis of the units themselves is that they were poorly designed. This particular unit, this particular commercial unit in the last 9 years has gone through 4 redesigns. The reason for this failure is that the units themselves were mounted directly on the slab. The coils for the units run the entire height of the unit. So it goes from slab to the top of the unit themselves. And the drain pans have no heaters. So all the condensate that accumulates in cold weather just creates ice around the coils, and that is what caused it to fail. There's no amount of preventative maintenance, according to this contractor, that would have alleviated this failure. It was when it was installed, it was a fairly new technology, and they've learned quite a bit. The new unit, we have installed a new unit at Pacific High due to similar failure. The new unit is installed 12 inches above the ground, and the coils on the unit themselves are 2 feet higher to allow that condensate to drain off. I don't know if that answered your question.
That does. So are we going to pursue with Mitsubishi some sort of return on the cost that this is costing our city just because of the poor design? Is there a warranty that can be pursued here or other recourse?
I don't believe there is. Mr. Leach or Mr. Hauser may have a little more information on that. The units, at least talking with the Mitsubishi representatives who were here to do the startup at Pacific High, these units, or at least the one that we replaced, had a service life of about 12 to 16 years. And we got, the one at Pacific, I think we got 9 out of. Blatchley was a little bit more.
So on the second half of the question, what is our process then in moving forward with replacement, whether we're going, the replacement of a heating unit, some not necessarily maybe Mitsubishi, but we may have to go with it based on the other equipment that's already installed in the building, not having to replace that. Do we have to go with Mitsubishi? Can we look at different kinds of equipment or different manufacturers, or what? And what's the process in moving that all forward?
I think based on the time constraints that we have moving toward fall and winter, Mitsubishi will be the fastest install. I don't know exactly what the process is moving forward.
John?
I'll try to answer a couple questions here, and Ron, I may call the bench for some help here in a minute too. But first question was about pursuing something with Mitsubishi. We have some homework to do there, but I want to back up a bit and say, like I said at the beginning, the mission is to have heat in the schools as quickly as possible. So we have to keep the mission focus here and get something in place, even if it's a temporary solution while we look for the right solution. But Mr. Bartolaba was correct in saying that, and the contractors have verified this, that without doing substantial modifications to the building or connecting old systems, the quickest way is to go with the Mitsubishi route and get, is it another 7-year warranty if we go with what we're doing? So we get the 7-year warranty out of that. That gives us some breathing room. But one question I'd like to have answered through this is Mitsubishi has a pretty in-depth kind of a kickoff when they energize the system for the first time. Mitsubishi sends representatives here or wherever they're installed to make sure they're in correctly and they're signing off on it before we flip the on switch. So if these were installed incorrectly, which is what we're hearing, I want to find out if Mitsubishi signed off on that in the first place. And I need that question answered. But that's going to take us some time to evaluate that. But it's not done with just spend the money on the appropriation and call it good. There's a lot of research we still need to do. But again, it's very time sensitive, and we need to get heat in the rooms before winter gets here.
Are there other questions for the presenters before we? Okay. Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I'm being a little bit pedantic even asking the question, but I can't not ask it. So everybody's doing everything they can to make sure heat's available on time. What is the plan if we're unable to get heat into the building at the time that we need it? So is there a backup plan for heating the building?
I mean, all kind of probably speak to this. We're looking at different options, of course, looking at the timeline to potentially get the new heat pumps system installed. We're looking at options for heaters, heaters that we'll put in place in the building over during the night to heat the building up so we get the ambient temperature of the building up to a temperature that is comfortable. Ideally, we're shooting for that 68-degree Fahrenheit for that comfort level in the building, and try to get it a little bit higher so it stays through the day. Sun comes out, hopefully warms up during the day. But that's kind of some of the options we're looking at to find and to make sure that we have heat in the building when school starts and before it starts getting cold. So those are some of the options. Mike and John might want to speak to some of that too as well.
So you're talking about space heaters, like as a backup?
Yes, as a backup. And initially, my idea, I need to look a little bit more into if these units will actually heat the space, but is to put 2 space heaters. I don't know if you're familiar with the floor plan of Blatchley. It's kind of basically the corridors are in a square, and if we can put them point them in opposite direction on opposite corridors, and then use fans to try to move the air at least around the corridors, we can see if that can work. That was my initial idea anyway.
Thank you.
Dave, questions for the presenters?
So the initial thought, let's say today was the second reading and we said, go ahead, go. What's the time estimate on getting this done? And I'm assuming, since we haven't talked about it, that there's no oil backup to this, oil furnace backup to this system. Some systems do, some don't. I'm getting the head nod, no. And in the cost of comparison between oil and electricity when we swap this over, how much are we saving by going to heat pumps compared to oil? Or is it just the green aspect of it that we're worried about, or that we're thinking about there?
I don't have numbers on that. This is the only building in the district that does, only major building in the district that does not have any heat redundancy. The other buildings have an electric boiler with oil-fired backup.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was it? But no, I don't know what the savings is over.
Great, and I do have one question for you while you're in the hot seat there. Can you talk to me about some safeguards that you'll be putting in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again in the future? $400,000 is a good chunk of change. To have all the units fail at the same time seems not exactly a coincidence, I guess. So I just want to make sure that going forward here, we have some safeguards that we know we're going to need to replace them. It sounds like 10 to 15 years is an expected life, that we know in the future that we're going to have to take a look at this. So talk to me about this process so that we're not doing an emergency appropriation again right before school happens.
Sure. Well, I mean, working on these units, requires a, I believe it's a, refrigeration or heating license, which nobody on our staff has. We would end up having to hire a contractor to do any maintenance other than cleaning the units. It was a boiler system. We have people on staff that can do, they can work their way through boilers, but this is a bit more high tech. So the answer to that would be, we would have to, I don't know if retainer is the right word, but get a contractor to hire a contractor to do the maintenance on these.
Thank you. Crystal, questions for the presenters?
I do. So the installation was in 2011. It looks like in about 11 years, it failed beyond an acceptable tolerance, the ones that are installed right now. I think from the recommendation, we had two partial recommendations, and I feel like we merged those to kind of get to the recommendation from staff, which is, I believe, to purchase and install new Mitsubishi heat pumps. Is that correct? So my question, and it's kind of based off of what John said, so we would then have a 7-year warranty to extend out so that repairs would happen within that 7-year period. And then we're going to look to see if it makes sense to continue with Mitsubishi. I guess I asked that question because I also heard that there was the original design, and then there was a few redesigns that happened because we found out that design number 1 had some flaws. So is Mitsubishi now top quality that we want to go with them? I understand that we're kind of putting a Band-Aid on a wound here, but is that our plan? Is that we'll go with Mitsubishi because time-wise it makes sense? And then we're just going to go out 7 years and figure out 7 years from now if we look to find something that is a better fit or better design?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in. There's lots of questions in there, and
Yeah,
there's
there
still
were.
something from the last question, or the last question the mayor asked too, that I'd like to address. Yours was how to prevent this from happening again, and you're talking about the analysis on, is this the best machine? Is this the best solution? What are we going to do? How are we going to look for a replacement? You know me, I'm going to make my plug for asset management. But something we did discover is that the school district has the same CMMS, the same computerized maintenance management system that the city has. We pay for a license for that IT system. Our assets are enrolled in there, and we can track maintenance when things are due. We talked about condition assessments at past meetings. I mean, heck, this is pretty much a condition assessment right now. We know the condition of the heat pump system. So there is possibly an opportunity to, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. The school district could abandon that license to that CMMS system. We could absorb their assets into our system at no additional cost. Am I going to get the head nod from Ron there? But we pull their assets in, and as we learn these things, then we know the continual condition of these assets, and we can start to make these risk-based decisions like you see in this memo here. You know, every time something like this comes up, you know, we do our preventative maintenance. We can see across all the departments what maintenance is being done on what cycle. We can look at what level of repairs need to happen, what type of preventative stuff needs to happen. And then when we get to a repair or replacement decision, you know, then we can do this analysis like monitoring the conditions. Do we transfer it? Do we run it to failure? So I don't know the answers to those questions right now, but I think we've got some opportunities. We've always heard that school buildings are ours, and that's true. But if we are going to run into situations like this, I'd really like to see what's out there, how they're working, and what is the remaining life on everything, and how we can extend that as much as possible.
And I've heard a couple of different numbers. So I heard about 16 years, I heard 10 to 15 years. So life expectancy of these heat pumps, do we even have that? And I guess I asked that because we also discussed there were flaws with the original one. So maybe we just bought a product that wasn't going to withstand a typical heat pump. But actually 11 years would be right within that 10 to 15 window. So maybe we should have anticipated the design. Do we know if we purchase and replace these Mitsubishi heat pumps, what the life expectancy would be on that?
I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head. As I said, we're still doing a lot of homework on this one. I don't know if it's in the memo or not, but we did find that the systems may not have been the right systems for Southeast Alaska because of the temperature range they're supposed to operate within. We had many days that were colder than the conditions that these Mitsubishi systems were supposed to operate within.
Do we have, other than Blatchley, and now the Pacific High one has been replaced, but other than Blatchley, do we have more of these heat pumps in the system?
Yes, we have one more in the vocational addition shops at the high school.
And how old is that? Are we going to be anticipating replacing that as well? And while they're here, can we dial in on that one and say, has it been installed correctly? Is it operating correctly? And what is its lifespan?
It is operating right now. The representatives from Mitsubishi looked at that one as well. They had some questions as to how it's been operating. That one has been operating well. There's a few things that they recommended adding. One thing was raising the unit itself, because again, it's mounted directly to the slab, and then also adding a few other things to allow it to run more efficiently, but it is running, and at this time, I don't anticipate if we make these changes or adjustments to the system, I don't anticipate it having a catastrophic failure like the Blatchley unit did.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously we need to get heated in the winter, but as I'm listening, say I'm a little irritated by the timing because I mean, we don't have a choice. I mean, we're going to be spending money, whether it's this or something else. How long, I mean, from what I understand, there were complaints about the heating system last school year. Why are we only hearing about this now? And I don't want to be too gotcha about this, but it strikes me as this is something we should have heard about a lot earlier. You know, my answer would be wood stoves everywhere, but I don't think that's going to be real popular. but biomass, it would be the cheapest. But anyway, but why is it taking us till August to figure out they're not working? Because they obviously weren't working right last year.
Yeah, so as we were going through, I mean, we started having some issues with the heat and it was coming up. And so as we were going through and trying to ascertain what the issues were and trying to get contractors to come out and do some of the work, and we can talk a little bit more about that. I know Mike can go into a little more detail on that. as we're going through and trying to assess what the problems are, getting people to come in, do some of the work, getting it scheduled and getting it in place, we had to, towards the end, start, looking at having some supports, and we started having cold temperatures in the buildings. We talked in April to the school board about some of the heat issues that we're having and that we're looking into trying to get replacements for. And so the timeline to make that happen, getting people to come out, inspect the units, try to figure out what was going on, and then ultimately led us to this situation where we were informed that this is pretty much a catastrophic failure of the systems, and we're having to look at a replacement. As far as timelines, Mike, you might want to speak to that a little bit more as far as, getting people to come in and look at it. But when we realized it was we have to go through and potentially look at a replacement for all the units, that's when it's like, okay, we need to look and have a bigger conversation around this. So.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we got on this particular unit, we got our first work order on it in November, I believe, and I couldn't get a contractor to look at it until Christmas Eve. He came and looked at it. He said he thought he knew what the problem was, and that was he was going to order a part. In February, that part arrived, and it did not fix the issue. After that, I could not get a hold of him. He would not answer my phone calls. And then in March, we finally found a contractor who could come and look at it, and he was able to figure out that it was an enormous problem. And then in April, we brought it in front of the school board.
Anything else for our presenters?
One more.
Dave?
I remember my other question. Let's pretend like we're on the second meeting of this and we pass it tonight and we say, go ahead and do this. And we know it's a sort of a rush thing to get heat in the building. When would all this start? When would we start, parts getting here, heaters put in, heat flowing, kids wearing t-shirts to school?
I think if we started right now or tomorrow, and John may have a little more information on this, I believe I believe the units were 6 to 8 weeks out to get here. I mean, that's just getting here. That's not complete install.
Well, thank you both for answering the Assembly's questions. Appreciate your time this evening. If there are any further, we'd appreciate you coming back up again if so desired. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion amongst the Assembly about these heat pump replacements? Kevin?
If it's all right with John, can Ron come up and?
Sure.
If it's all right with Ron too.
You already saw him here, so I don't think you can
Yeah.
run away yet.
He can't hide now.
Yeah, there you are. From a standpoint of looking at this as an asset management and the predictive powers around asset management with systems like this going forward, are we looking at better protections so that we don't have emergencies like this with the information that you're gathering and that the data that you're able to put together? Because having an emergency situation where we're having to put heat into a building, as we come up on school's 2 weeks away, this unit is 6 to 8 at best. We still have 2.5, 3 weeks until we meet again before we can even approve this. I mean, we're looking at they're not going to be installed and ready probably until sometime in early November at best.
Yeah, I think your timeline's about accurate there. So yes, condition assessment, as John described, gives a good indication as to the estimated remaining life of whatever asset you're monitoring. It is technically one of the techniques that was listed in the assessment. It would fall under monitoring. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we need to invest everywhere across the city, look at our most critical assets and invest in condition assessment. I remember a month or so ago when I came and did the presentation here, the special report. One of the questions that popped up was, how do you plan for events like the trail failure that happened this last year? And that specific case, condition assessment's only going to help you so much because it's kind of a catastrophic, natural disaster. But there are things that you can do to indicate things prematurely. The other backup would have contingencies for failures like this. If you look through the memo here, one of the things to note also is transfer of risk. When you transfer risk, typically that's, you can buy a warranty or an extended warranty, or you can pass off operations and maintenance to other organizations. In this case, seeking an extended warranty and making sure that we have good condition assessment and good PMs, preventative maintenance. I think those are kind of the best scenario for us. And not just limited to this specific case. I think that can help us with all of our critical assets.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess my final comment, I hope, is on something like this and in this particular situation, the critical need of heat in this building is paramount. But I would also like to see us take this as a real indicator that we need to move quite quickly on this and maybe have some extremely serious conversations about moving the CMMS over as a consolidated program and really working on getting risk assessments and conditions assessments done on all of our infrastructure, including our schools.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I would agree.
As a whole unit, because it's a community thing.
Yeah,
We own the buildings.
something interesting about condition assessments is if we're monitoring data on these specific units. So say you have 5 systems, 10 units. We have similar units at our other facilities on the city side. So I think we have something like 11 units citywide, that are all Mitsubishi units. They're not the same exact model, but if you start identifying issues like the coil failure being, close to finished grade, as we've experienced with these, you start figuring out how you can modify your other systems. And so it's not just a one-off that we can fix the school districts, heat pumps. We can take lessons learned and apply them in other places too. And it all comes down to good data. And there's some pretty cool data analytics tools that are out now that, can kind of get more into predictive analytics and figure out things prematurely. And that's where we're trying to go. It's all collecting data, and that comes down to condition assessment.
Could I add one quick
Please,
thing
John.
to that answer? We talk condition assessment a lot, and I think it's worthwhile to say this. Condition assessment doesn't always mean insert name of consulting organization or consulting company here to come in and provide a very expensive condition assessment. What we just did is a condition assessment on the heat pump system. We have data now. And we can do this with, and I don't want to make this a long drawn out conversation about asset management, but the question was about the value of it and what we can do to prevent. Something very important here is if we have similar systems, you start to learn failure rates and you develop what's called a mean time between failures. And when you know that, alarms start to go off that says, this is kind of the lifespan that we're experiencing on these things. Maybe it's time we start putting some investments into this because it is a critical system. So we're not in a position where we're spending $600,000 on an emergency appropriation. That's all I wanted to add.
Any other questions for Ron while he's up here? Thank you, Ron. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering, because of the timing issue, is there any way we can push this along instead of having to wait another 2.5 weeks to the next meeting? Are we able to have a special meeting? That's possible.
I have a note about that wrote down here and would like to see the results of tonight's vote, and we'll be meeting with Sarah and John.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just quick question for John. So I realize we're pretty much locked into the Mitsubishi system, but is there any timeline or any chance to look at any other brands? Is it even in the realm and still get it in this year? Get it in before the winter?
Before winter, I'm 99% certain the answer is no. We even looked at reconnecting interruptible systems and what it would take to just get that up and running again, and it's not an easy task. So it's pretty intrusive to swap over at this point. I think we just need to get heat in, and the fact that we can buy another 7-year warranty with the system helps.
John, I just want to take a minute to talk about a couple things on there. Number one, I just hope that this kind of rude awakening, gives us a chance to clarify our relationship with the school district regarding repairs and maintenance on buildings and how we can continue to work together in harmony and in a way that reduces costs for both parties. I think it was interesting to note that we're both paying for a license on a system that we might not need to. So it's one example of building that relationship between the school district and the municipality on and getting to the point of reducing redundancies, saving costs, and ensuring a top quality product at the end of the day. I'd also like to call attention to a sentence in the fiscal note about the unexpected nature of the asset failure and to the need to complete condition assessments. I think that's been pushed. That's been talked about by assemblies for quite some time. I think the need to replace the school buildings is known, but no one's actually put their foot down and said we're going to do this. So I'm hoping that this is also a wake-up call to the assembly that issues like this are imminent with our schools. I hope that they're not. I hope that this isn't going to continue. But I have a feeling that our school buildings are they're getting to nearing the end of their useful life without a major rehab. And we need to get ahead of that at this point, or else we're going to be 10 years too late on it. So John, in your free time, if you wouldn't mind taking up that one as well, it'd be much appreciated. In conjunction with school staff as well. Lean on them because they can help this process along. I would agree that we have no choice at this point except to go with Mitsubishi and spend this money. I think it's the best, quickest, cheapest fix. But I hope we do we use our 7-year grace period in order to completely take a look. One of the questions I would ask is, why is this the only building without redundant heat? I don't necessarily like that idea. So anybody else on 22-19? Dave?
I think one of the things that I think that always has concerned me from my fire side of life is that every time we build something or anytime something is built in town, not necessarily our buildings, but our buildings do it too, is that we always seem to have a variety of different specs or pieces of equipment in the building. And a great example for me personally is fire alarm panels. For a while there, and I can't speak for the last few years, but for a while there, every building in this town's got a different fire alarm panel in it. So when I would respond to a fire call, it was like I was having to reinvent the wheel, trying to remember how to make that system work rather than everything sort of being the same. And it just takes time. And it's the same with this. If we come up with some, whether Mitsubishi or whoever, system that works for us, we should stick with one system so that we don't have to have repairmen that need to know 3 different systems. When we buy vehicles in town, we generally buy I'm thinking, because that's what we buy, it was Ford vehicles. And then the mechanics really need to know what Ford vehicles do, except for the major equipment. They don't need to learn 3 or 4 different systems on how Dodges and Fords and Chevys work. They just need to know Fords. So whether one system is better than the other, I don't know in this case. But we need to figure out a system that's working for us so that when we hire a refrigeration guy, he can figure out how to work on that one system, not 3 or 4 different systems, and work towards that. I think that's going to help us in the long run. That's not the easiest solution, because if we switch, then we have, multiple different things out there. But we sort of need to work to figure that out, so we have one system of things working to make it easy to work on. Thanks.
Rebecca? Rebecca, you're muted.
Thanks, sorry. I'm looking at the ordinance and the motion, and I just want to make sure there's nothing in there that specifies a particular company. So since we know already that we're going to have to go with a backup plan for heat, clearly we need to pass this, or I plan to vote yes on this tonight to move things along as fast as we can. But I'm hoping that other brands of heat pump can be considered, like maybe, and I think this probably is the discretion of the maintenance people at the district, but or maybe Ron has some input on that. But I think we can pass this motion tonight, get things going, but we're not restricted from exploring other options. And maybe we have to do plan B for a while to make sure there's heat in the building while we get a more permanent, better solution. I'm just disappointed with the heat pumps not having a longer life expectancy. So I guess my question is to Sarah and Brian, if we pass this the way it's written without an amendment, there's nothing naming a brand, and there's nothing restricting the people making the decision about what happens next to a particular brand of heat pump. Correct?
That is as I read the ordinance.
Okay.
Final thoughts from the assembly? Sarah, on the motion?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-19 on first reading, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Himschoot,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Knox.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on first reading. Normally, this ordinance would come forward for second reading on August 23rd, but as the mayor mentioned, this may come forward earlier at a special meeting, and if so, we'll notice that.
Perfect, thank you. As it has been past an hour, we'll take a break and we will reconvene in an appropriate amount of time. All right, well, as we are all seated, I'd like to call the meeting back to order and head on to item F, please.
I move to approve, go ahead. All right, I move to approve a final subdivision plat filed by the Sitka Community Land Trust for a planned unit development at 1410 and 1414 Halibut Point Road.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve 22-112. John, before we went to public comment, is you or Amy like to introduce this one?
Caught me while I had an ice cube in my mouth. That was perfect timing.
I saw that.
Amy, if you wouldn't mind coming up to give a brief introduction here.
Amy was ready. She knew her item was next. She does not have an ice cube in her mouth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy Ainsley, Planning Director. So this portion of what was referred to in town as sort of the old city shops area was a part of the original plan when the land trust approached the city back in 2015. And Randy, yeah, 2015. And essentially the idea was to kind of phase the development. So the first parcel, which is at 1306, which is currently under development, was granted at that time in 2015 with the intent to transfer the remaining parcels immediately to the north there for a second phase of development once the first phase was completed. So that conversation took place here at the Assembly last fall in about September, and the Assembly voted to grant the remaining land in this area to the trust. So in the last year, the trust has been working on developing a major subdivision plan of planned unit development. And I'm happy to provide any information that you might have or provide any information on questions you might have about the planned unit development process in specifics. But in general terms, it's a form of a major subdivision that allows for really broad relaxation of development standards or other subdivision codes that essentially get agreed upon up front, worked through with the Planning Commission, and then brought to the Assembly for final approval. There have been a few different reviews of these plans. A conceptual plan was presented to both the Planning Commission and the Assembly when we were having the discussion around the land disposal. And then since that time, there have been 3 reviews with the Planning Commission: a conceptual plat, a preliminary plat, and a final plat. All of those reviews, I think, from my observations, went really well. I think we had a really productive conversation at the commission level about appropriate relaxations in code and just kind of the overall land use plan that's inherent in the PUD design. Again, just the last little detail to leave those of you who might be interested with, the resulting planned unit development results in an additional 7 lots for single family home development. There's 1 lot that is on the larger side, which will be the site of a future multifamily development. The exact plans for that are still kind of being worked out, but it does set aside that land. And it makes use of a lot of open space on the remainder of the lot, given landslide history in that area, to leave a appropriate amount of space and not develop within that space, but to use it for other sort of neighborhood and amenities such as boat parking or, a community, some areas with that might have some community green space and that kind of thing. And then there is a small boundary line adjustment as well in the northwest corner of that lot as well. Those are the kind of overall, main things that plat achieves.
Great, thank you. If the Assembly does have questions, we'll call you back up. Appreciate it. Is there any public comment on 22-112?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. I have a lot of things I'm going to be saying, I've said again, I've said previously, and that is when you speak about urban planning, you have to think about the context and how you're building. The context here was affordable housing. I've said in the past that I didn't think approaching $300,000 is affordable. You don't own the land. And what it is detached housing. And in dealing in urban planning, I don't think that that is where the current thinking is, that people are moving away from detached single-family homes. And I think that the city shops, if we were dealing with affordable housing, we could have designed something a lot better and utilized it a lot better. And again, with the migration studies that I have read for Alaska, these are going to be things that people are going to be moving in and out of. And I think it would give greater utility to the demographic that comes here. That being said, there are 7 or 5 lovely little places, and 2 will be continued. That's a foregone conclusion. What the city earns from that is 6 mills, and they estimate approximately $1,500 per house, or $10,000 for that one grouping. I have to tell you, if you're dealing with the financial cost, as my grandmother would say, that's bupkas. In the scheme of things, $10,000 a year for that, because if you used it economically, I knew that it could have brought in a much larger stream of money if the city wanted to do it. But they didn't, and they chose to do this. This other area, I know it's been through 20 different things and everything has gone through, but I still think they could have utilized that space better and have designed it with modern design, which would give a higher density of people and living, as opposed again to detached housing. And it's just been, I know that their hearts were in the right place and they thought they were doing the right thing. But I think if you really deal with urban planning, this was not the way to go and does not support a mobile community with affordable housing. And today's Sitka Sentinel had Mount Edgecombe not having any housing here. And if we had, multiple wonderful design units like Habitat for Humanity, but in a different way for Sitka, there may have been a greater range where people could have gotten, I'll say, a reasonable temporary housing so they can teach at Mount Edgecombe. Thank you.
I'm Carol Voisin, and I live in Sitka. Good evening. I'm speaking in support of the Sitka Community Land Trust subdivision plat for a planned unit development on Halibut Point Road. I think that you should know what brings me to support this nonprofit request. My professional experience and personal values led me to this Sitka nonprofit. I retired from teaching at Southern Oregon University after 20 years of teaching ethical thinking for the 21st century. In addition to this, I'm a retired deacon in the United Methodist Church with a doctorate in systematic theology. Upon arriving in Sitka and doing some touring of the town, my friends proudly pointed out the homes being built by the community land trusts that are affordable. I thought, oh my gosh, this community is thinking and acting in some really good ways. In Ashland, Oregon, where I served for 8 years on their assembly, we struggled to get bare bones affordable land trusts going. I must say that seeing this accomplishment in Sitka impresses me. To see a community land trust actually work to provide affordable home ownership in a community half the size of the one I came from, I think is a remarkable statement about Sitka. To me, it says you care about those who live here by providing an opportunity to live affordably in Sitka, to also ensure a diversity of folks who can live here while safeguarding the land. A community land trust, as we all know, is an innovative model that has flourished for over 40 years. The trust must acquire land, which is one of the most expensive parts of the project. Here's where I thank you, members of the Assembly, for providing the land for these homes. Without the Assembly, this project wouldn't have gotten off the ground. Thank you. As the newest board member of the Community Land Trust, I want to say that the leadership of the Land Trust is in very capable hands with Mim McConnell and Randy Huey. I'll move on so that they can address the assembly. However, I want each of you, each assembly member, I want to thank you for your time and energy and dedication to the community that you serve. Thank you.
I'm Randy Huey with the Land Trust. And so the plat's pretty straightforward. You're pretty familiar with it. The Planning Commission has advanced it through 3 steps. We hope that you will grant the final approval for that. Things are going well. The Land Trust model is increasingly well understood and accepted. We have buyers in line. Houses 4 and 5 will be complete by the first week of October, and by midwinter, we'll be building houses 6, 7, and 8 concurrently. So our production capacity is increasing. The longer I've engaged with this, and it's been more than 10 years, I believe that the Land Trust model addresses the major forces in American home economics. There's an astonishing increase in the house costs here in Sitka. We've certainly seen, but it's across the nation. We also see the corporate buy-up of homes. Well, that's inconvenient. The corporate buy-up of homes as investments, turning homeowners into renters, and that's a nationwide phenomenon. And another kind of major force that's happening at this time in America is that boomers like me will be taking out a large amount of money out of housing in the next few decades, right? And who pays that but younger people? The Land Trust model of ownership addresses those forces. So right now, with regard to affordability, right now, someone with a year-round job making $25 an hour can buy our smallest home, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, 825 square foot house, $25 an hour. They can buy it. That's payment, interest, taxes, insurance, homeowners association fees, and the land trust fees, all costs. And certain assumptions going into that, but they are fair assumptions. At $35 an hour, they can buy the home that's being built, the 2 little 3-bedroom homes that are being built right now, at $35 an hour, household income. So we're achieving an affordability, which is pretty significant. And it's certainly an affordability that people can buy those homes for far less than they could rent them for in the market, far less. So we are not reaching as far. There are people that we are unable yet to serve. More public subsidy can address that. So what's next? In the coming years, we'll be asking you for more land to do another neighborhood. We believe in the model. Sitka needs more homes. It needs more buildings for people to live in. And that's another good thing about how we're going about this. So the housing crisis in Sitka is likely to get worse, not better, in the coming years. So thank you for your support. Please, approve this plat subdivision. Thank you.
Good evening, Mim McConnell. It's always so strange to be in this position. Thank you, all of you, for your time and service, and some of you for long time encouragement and support for the Community Land Trust model. I wanted to encourage you to vote in favor of this plan unit development. We're real excited about it. We have people interested in getting a place built on this other neighborhood. And so I also wanted to give you a little bit of an update of what is happening statewide. I've been working on a Trust Alaska organization based on a Trust Montana one that deals with creating community land trusts in rural places. And the reason why I've been involved in that is because I have been contacted personally by a number of communities in Alaska saying, we've heard about your community land trust. We want to know how to do it. How can we get one started in our community? And there's been so much interest in that I've gotten help from the Northwest Community Land Trust Coalition, of which I'm on their board. They've been very helpful in getting something like this going in Alaska. And I would, in fact, tomorrow I'm going to be at AML, Alaska Municipal League, on a panel talking about affordable housing, telling about Sitka Community Land Trust, and telling them about Trust Alaska and saying, if you're interested, let me know. I'll get you on my email list. I've had people on calls in Alaska and the lower 48 trying to help us make this happen. And we've had like 10 or 15 people on the call. So they see Sitka as a model. They see this as a positive thing that we're doing, and it is. I also want to say that it's just one thing that could be done for affordable housing. There's lots of different ways that you can take care of the affordable housing problem situation, and this is just one way, one thing that can be done. And I encourage people to think outside of the box and find other solutions besides this one that can meet some other needs within the community. And I think that's all I have. And then Randy and I, of course, are available for any questions that you might have about the ordinance before you, or yeah, thank you.
Any other public comments on? Thank you.
Ryan Herbert. Sorry, I like to let everybody go first. I do agree. Sitka Land Trust is a beautiful thing to have here. The only thing I've ever wanted to comment on our housing here is I think it's too far spaced out. It's too many single level things. I've seen in San Diego when it grew. I saw in Japan when it grew, and places like Miami. And the only reason why I mention these places is because they're tight on space. So what they did was they grew up like we should. Instead of just putting homes, I would consider putting parking garage underneath, save space on parking, and putting multi-levels, especially in that spot. It's very unique because of the height of the houses. You're not going to block their view. It should be like 3 levels of wonderful condos, studio apartments, 1-bedroom apartment stuff. So I feel like this is great, but I'd like to endeavor more fanatical small city engineers on board and see if we can get some money invested into helping them grow even further and expand their models and their ideas to benefit such a tight town. I mean, unless they're going to give us more Tongass National Forest to rip apart and build into, I think we need to start growing up and not out. Because I've seen a lot of places here that have way too much parking in between, way too much room around them. I mean, we have Aspen Suites that has 7 parking spots. We have, all the theater downtown that requires no parking. We need to start thinking about space for living. And I do want to implore that we don't need just $25 an hour employees or 35. We have a lot of jobs that are vacant right now because we don't have housing for $18 an hour, $16 an hour people. We don't have studio apartments for them to start out on to save money. We don't have $18 an hour apartments for them to start off to save money because we give it to the tourist industry. Everybody that comes here for Allen Marine stays in our housing, comes here for Seacon stays in our housing, comes here for 16 different endeavors for commercial, and you have untold amount of charter companies that bring people from out of here that stay in our housing, our local housing. And I would implore that we start putting people into Mount Edgecombe High School to save space for Sitka Land Trust houses to be built just for locals. Because how many of those places are going to be bought for people that stay here seasonally or rent out to seasonal? I mean, I want to make more conditions for our local buildings to be set aside for local use only, and start figuring out housing as well with our property to push to commercial housing, which is basically all the people that come here and work here. Thank you.
Anyone else on 22-112? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
Yeah, I seen this a lot over the last few bit on the planning and zoning. And it's been interesting to kind of watch the development of it. And I think it's very easy to kind of nitpick or kind of throw stones at the people who are actually trying to get something done. And I think that they should be really celebrated for the amount of innovative thinking that went into this. It was interesting to see how they had some land that honestly wasn't really appropriate to put houses on. And so they've turned that into green space, and they made the lot smaller, and the planning and zoning was on board with making some what would normally be substandard lots, because they can take that extra green space into account, and having parking off to the sides, and then and having less in directions, I think in some cases, no setbacks, because it's a planned unit development. And so I think they've made really nice use of the land, taking into account both the neighborhood aspects, but also just the physical limitations of the land and place, and understanding that people in Sitka need places to store their boats. So that, so using that land off to the side, which I guess if your boat gets hit by a landslide, that's one thing, but that's nothing compared to a person, although some people's boats, they may not agree with me. And then also making the deal to shave off a little bit for the property owner next door. I just think they've worked very hard to be flexible and to get as much as they can out of this and help as many people. I know over the years, haven't been entirely on board with the land trust and their mission, whether it's not going to work. And it's really nice to see them have figured out how to make it work. And I've become much more enthusiastic about what they're doing after I've seen them get in there and do it, which is exactly what they said would happen way back when they were first saying, let us prove it to you. And they are very aware that they're not fixing all the problems, but you've got to start somewhere, and they've done a lot of it. And it's nice to, it gets easier the next time. Every time you do something, you get better at it. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they come up with next. So again, I know that I don't think I ever saw any votes against. I mean, I know that all the planning commission voted yes on all of their plans, but I don't think I saw anybody vote no on any of the votes. So like I said, there's been a lot of meetings about this, and they've done what they're supposed to do. It's nice. Thank you.
Kevin? Thank you. I pretty much dovetail off what Tor said. It's been said by several of the speakers too. This is just a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't fit every situation. And yes, at $25, there are people who make less than that, and that's a problem. That's a real problem. But this is part of the puzzle. I think it's a good solution. And I think another member of the public said 350,000 isn't affordable. Unfortunately for Sitka, that is affordable in some places, in some ways. These houses, I visited one when they first came out. They're not huge, but they're new, they're clean, they keep you warm, they take care of you. You can live in them. And it's, these are luxuries here in Sitka, because some houses you have to pay an arm and a leg for a house that's old, moldy, and gross. So I'm going to support it. I think we should support it. Yeah, I think this is a good thing, and thank you for everyone who's been involved, the people in the land trust, Randy and Mim, and thank you for serving on the board, Carol and Amy, and all the planning commission and everyone else involved. I think really appreciate it. This is a good, like I said, piece of the puzzle, and I think this is nothing but good. Thank you.
Kevin? I got a question, I guess, for Amy about how do we have other planned unit developments that have been done in Sitka?
We do. The primary one that comes to mind for me right now is Lillian Drive. That's one of the more recent ones. And again, some of the major concessions that were a part of that were for higher density. It was smaller lots so that more properties and, could be developed within them. But it also reduced setbacks on some sides to preserve open space. And there were also some use limitations, as well as I believe most of those carry a restriction for single family homes kind of thing. There may be others. They're not coming to mind for me right now, but that's the predominant one that's readily accessible.
Okay, so on that one, there's, under our code, there's an ownership requirement around a planned unit development that requires, I can just read it, shall be owned or under the control of the applicant, whether the applicant is an individual, partnership, or corporation, or groups of individuals, partnerships, and corporations. And then it goes on that there's specific deeds and other things that get written in, or deed restrictions to the properties. This one seems pretty straightforward to me because it's under the Sitka Community Land Trust. And their model, provides a lot of that. And, there's specific restrictions and deeds within that model. Is this a common thing to have within planned unit developments? Or do you, so the code predates you, but it was apparently put in about 2003, it looks like. I find it curious, and just looking forward, how it would work for this particular plot.
In general, you have to have owner approval for any kind of subdivision action, right?
Mhm.
And whoever's bringing forward a subdivision action, any land that's involved in it, the owner needs to be a part of that process, right? In terms of the restriction of it being under a single owner, I'm not as familiar with that particular restriction. If you'd like me to do some looking real quick, I can certainly do that. But some of the overarching controls that do apply universally are those code relaxations, which we cite through plat notes. So again, as in a different, let's say in a different case where ownership of land might transfer, the plat notes still provide that overarching, it's sort of a quasi-regulatory role, right? But it defines what those relaxations in code were and what they will continue to be going forward, so that anyone who buys into that property knows that, while this may sit in a R1 or R2 zone, there are particular rules that apply to this by virtue of it being a planned unit development. By noting those things on the plat, it runs with the property and it has a level of permanence. And then there are other mechanisms as well, such as easement agreements and those sort of things that get cited on the plat as well to ensure consistency over time, and as well for that it runs with the property and that future property owners would be aware of those things and know that they have to abide by them.
Right, okay. So in this consideration, we're considering the plat adjustment and the designation of this as a planned unit development. And then going forward, there will be additional conversations with the planning commission. And then the final things would come forward to us, or this is it?
This is it. This is the final. And it's not necessarily specific to planned unit developments. All major subdivisions come before the assembly for a final approval.
Sure.
So this is a specific instance of a major subdivision because it's a planned unit development, which makes things a little bit more interesting. But that's not what's necessarily driving your need for review in this case.
Okay, so that the separate property that's being carved out, the one for the multi-unit piece, does that come back at all to the planning commission or to the assembly, or are we, once this is done, we're done and they're moving forward?
Yeah, I would not necessarily envision that would need to come back to either the planning commission or to the assembly unless there was some sort of specific request to deviate from code standards. So once that lot is subdivided and then a development plan moves forward, as long as that development plan fits within all of our standards, then there wouldn't be any extra approval needed to build a multifamily unit on that lot. So again, as long as the lot fits the zoning regulations at time, there wouldn't be need for future approvals unless, again, they're doing something conditional or they need a variance or something like that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Amy while we have her up here? Amy, thank you for your time. Kevin, did you have anything else? Okay. Well, it's now or never. If no one else has anything.
I'm going to echo a little bit of what Tor said. I think it's a model that seems to be taking off. We're seeing more and more success with it. The illustration that I think Mr. Huey was making with the $25 and $35 an hour piece, it's not that the individual is making $25 or $35. That's the combined household income. And if you calculate that out, it's somewhere around $52,000 to $72,000 a year. So these we're better approaching, especially in our current housing market, a model that will provide some more affordability for greater number of families in Sitka, particularly those first-time home buyers. So I'm encouraged by it, and I like the innovation here with the planned unit development and then the multifamily off to the side. Like Kevin said, it's not the golden egg, but it's something. We're moving something forward here. So thank you, guys.
Anything else from the assembly? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the final subdivision plat filed by the Sitka Community Land Trust for a planned unit development at 1410 and 1414 Halbert Point Road. Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item F.
Thank you. That would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual. Is there anyone to address the assembly this evening?
Richard Ween speaking. I find, when you listen to certain things, it's almost like a case review. And in dealing with the failure of these heat pumps, it should be a case review. And I think Mr. Leach has somewhat of a handle on it with the computerized systems and et cetera. But the important thing here is that, for example, there was one review of the system, and then the contractor called in another review, and then the city called in another review of those systems to evaluate, which brings me up to the next question is, what engineer and what went on when they placed those original systems where it wasn't appropriate? Now, there was an engineer, and I'm sure there was a plan for it. So that's number one. The other thing is again, did Mitsubishi sign off on those machines? Again, this is a case history of, how do you do something? And in essence, we'll call it not the right way. Under the correspondence notice in the agenda, they talk about a FERC notice. I really wish these things would be spoken about in some way, and I hope Mr. Leach in his report or somebody will bring up this fact that a fellow by the, oh my gosh, excusez-moi. Anyway, there's an announcement that they want to put up a hydro plant in Nelson Bay, which is on the east side of Baranof Island, and that it's done by an individual who's actually running for Senate. When I look up his Form 3 for his financial disclosures, everything is 0000. He has no website, but yet he wants to develop a hydroelectric area here. And if you go look at the site plan, my notion would be a resounding no. I think the city put forth some barriers to it, but this is something that shouldn't happen. Which leads me to my next question is, what about Blue Lake Dam and their FERC? The issue is that this seems to be long overdue, and I really wish there would be some reporting on that. And I think it is very important that we have Where Are We Sitka report, because all of these things, we talk about these things individually, $600,000 for a heat pump, and then we hear the mayor talk about, well, we have to redo the schools. How many tens of millions of dollars is that? And we really need to know where we stand, and it needs to be available to the citizens. Thank you.
Ryan Herbert. I'll be talking with the schools after this meeting today about fixing their problem. I can get it fixed in about a week, 2 weeks. The thing is that we have, in the commercial industry, we have heat fans. They do about 600 square feet. You can get 2 per room. If you have backup, so we'll order probably 2 for every room in the class, and then you buy about 25% more, maybe 30% more, just in case some go bad. If you get them from Home Depot, they will replace the old ones. You can take back the ones we didn't unbox, so you get a full 100% warranty on everything that you spend there. Home Depot is a seaplane's flight away, so replacing equipment will take less than 4 hours to do if anything goes wrong, and it's a good temporary fix for now. And Home Depot also does easy online grant systems. You can get $5,000 for free for any school, up to $1.4 million they'll donate to fix a school. So we can get everything replaced we wanted to on all that stuff. And they'll probably just use their heat systems. And they're literally right over the ocean away from us. So fixing that would take less than a few hours to have it delivered either on Alaska Airlines or seaplanes. Warranties are actually the data timeline on every piece of equipment, car, anything that you own. So when there's a warranty on something, that's the end time of that product. Usually you want to sell it about 2 years before it goes bad for half price or 25% to somebody who wants it, and then take that money and buy the new one. If things go bad early, it's not our call. All we have to do is call Mitsubishi. They'll ship a brand new model over. Anytime you buy equipment like that, you never buy it new. You wait 2 years, 3 years while other people use it and see if it's a good product. We should never buy anything brand new. There's a video you can watch that proves this. It's called Nissan Titan Nightmare. When Nissan Titans came out, they had one $2 plastic arm that broke and caused $3,000 worth of damage and repair for the truck. School heating. Preventative maintenance is very important. Having people for the city that work in property management and preventative maintenance does an outside viewer's point of view to take care of the buildings that we have here, so this does not happen. But I mean, it's also easy to realize that everything has a warranty. 10 years, that's the cutoff. Sell it a year early. If it goes bad before that, replace it for free. I mean, like I said, I have Bilstein shocks on my truck, lifetime warranty. I never have to replace them again. Finding out like what products are worth, going through the systems of checks and balances, looking at other reviews, everybody else, looking at the data is very important and can be done online anytime you want to. Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. My name is Scott Celine, addressing the Blatchley heat pump deal. The city broke even with ripping the ductwork and the oil out. The city was using my unlimited refrigeration administrator's license for refrigeration work when those air-to-air heat pumps were put in. It's Mitsubishi wants you guys to be happy with it. Search went to Daikin. And when heat pumps first came out of Asia, they shipped with refrigerant in them. That's how several people were able to install heat pumps that people got online. There's a lot to the whole heat pump deal, but rest assured that the error at Blatchley is not an error. The contractors, they were bought as total consumer items. They are the perfect consumer items with a time life, and they don't work good when it gets cold out was part of the deal, but that works good when it's 40 and 100% humidity. The thing at Blatchley, there was a lot of issues with mold in the ductwork. And so that's one reason why it got changed out. Just rest assured that Mitsubishi wants it to work out for you guys. So you got no choice. It's the total consumer item. Be a lot different if the city would have been absorbing heat from the sea, but that wasn't really how it was going. You don't have to be a refrigeration guy to put in an air-to-air heat pump. You could send a guy from Mike's crew to their technical, maybe not as an end user, because they're trying to protect the salesmen or sales engineers that continually come in and monitor and plug in with diagnostics. And so it's nothing like the city cold storage where you bought a lemon and added to it for decades. So I want to thank you guys for being here.
Anyone else to address the assembly? Any item on or off tonight's agenda? Seeing none, that'll bring us to reports. My only report tonight is that I will be attending the AML conference starting tomorrow here in town. As assembly members did get notice, there is a community reception tomorrow night at 6, Odessa Theater, if assembly members are able to come. John.
Thanks, Mayor. I will also be at the conference for the next 3 days, but at least the first day I will be in the Alaska Municipal Management Association meetings, as you'll be in the Conference of Mayors meetings. Open finance, I've talked about that before, and the dashboard for transparency. It's been a hard time getting here, but I'll just say I got kind of fed up with the contractor and reached out and let them know the amount of time that we've been waiting on this. And to their credit, they put us as a pretty high priority, and in a matter of days, we've got a first draft of what that dashboard is going to look like. And now we're at the stage where we're just cleaning up the data to make sure it displays correctly. And I'm pretty excited about it. So once that's up and running, I'll let everybody know, and it'll be right there on the front page of our website, and you can start drilling down into pretty much any sort of financial data you want to know about the city. It'll have our revenues, it'll have our expenditures, it'll show real-time, almost real-time spending with the names of every single business that every single penny goes to. So that'll be out there soon. Last thing I have is we're underway with the cost allocation study. And I just have an interesting statistic to put out here. I talked about in the cruise season how we have a town of 8,500 that on some days, or we have the support services in place for a town of 8,500, and then on some days double our population. And that same support staff needs to support that town of really 15,000, 16,000 at that point. So since July 12th, the fire department has started tracking the very much increased number of calls they've been getting this year. We had a record year last year, but it's gone way up this year too. And not to get into the exact numbers here, but since July 12th, 40% of our EMS and fire calls have been for cruise passengers and visitors. So, I mean, we're looking at almost half of what our fire department is spending their time on now is for visitors, and that's great. That's fine, but that's why that cost allocation study is going to help. We've always been afraid to touch any of those CPV funds because of the whether or not we can tie it to the tourists. Well, we're doing that work to tie it to the tourists or the cruise passengers, and hopefully we'll be successful here, because I know our folks are working hard to welcome those visitors, just like the residents are working hard to welcome those visitors.
Thank you, Brian.
No report, thank you.
Liaison representatives. Kevin?
Parks and Rec met today. Reports from staff about the Seawalk extension project there's a slight delay on that going on, but they're still looking at that project happening. The Creston Harbor playground equipment that was recently removed because of some failures. The merry-go-round spinning apparatus thing is being replaced under warranty, so that should be coming back to us soon for all of those who love to get dizzy. Creston Harbor basketball court, that's been finished up or nearly finished up. There are a few spots that they're looking to touch up or fill in on the outside edges and they have a plan for that, but I don't know if anybody else has been down there, but that was a beautiful installation there, and it's already, that court gets used a lot, but I think people are really enjoying using it even more. It looks fabulous. And it actually kind of shores up some of the traction and tread on it too. So that's been cool. Sitka Trail Works reported about some of their upcoming and other projects that they've been doing. They had a summer program for youth modeled after the old SCORE program that community schools used to run and had some great success with it. And they actually now have full funding to run that program in 2023 over the whole summer. So they're very excited about that. And they're working very soon on the Salmon Lake Trail improvements. Their cross trail connector is still awaiting funding from one grant proposal to the Denali Commission, which they're anxious about because it was supposed to already been announced, but there's some delay in the announcements there. And then also the draft trail plan and improvements for the study they did is coming out this fall. They approved a couple of special use permits, one for a kayak service in and around the islands and other places around Sitka for visitors, but also community members alike. They had all kinds of people asking that are local residents that wanted to be able to use their services. So that's kind of exciting. And then one over at Baranof Warm Springs for a high-end tour group. And then they had a discussion about community gardens and food security, which was an interesting one, good one.
Any other liaison representatives? Sarah?
Okay, I'll run through our list of vacancies on our boards and commissions. We have the Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services, Library Commission, Parks and Rec, Port and Harbors, and Tree and Landscape. If folks are interested, they can contact our office and we'll walk them through that process. Our candidate filing for the municipal election closed on last Friday, August 5th at 5 p.m. We're in the process of getting candidate information out on our website. There are a number of options for people to vote in the municipal election. Folks can vote by mail. They can contact our office for a request form. They can vote in person, absentee, and that begins September 19th. There's personal representative, fax, and then of course in person on election day, which is October 4th.
Great, thank you. Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to adjournment. All those in favor say aye. Thank you, staff, for your presence this evening, and thank you, Rebecca, for joining remotely. We'll see you soon.
Good night.